This chapter that I'll be sharing from this wonderful book, Astrology, the Sacred Science by Joan Hodgson, and I have permission to read from it aloud for you from the White Eagle Publishing Trust in England and here in the United States. This is for entertainment and spiritual purposes only, to demystify astrology. And as you'll recall, the last full moon, we called it the strawberry moon, when that occurred, 6 houses of astrology gained new rulership. So we are truly living in unprecedented times. I think it's important to remember and recall and become aware that we chose to be here. We chose what time we'd enter and what planets would assist us in doing this for our soul's growth. And this one is about Mars and the 7 rays. Mars has always been known as the planet of fire, the bringer of war, strife, and destruction, and he almost always be termed the bad boy of the family. Yet out of the sufferings of war there often come great advances in knowledge and social progress, for the needs of war stimulate research, which can also bring its blessings in time of peace. So Creator always brings good out of evil, and the law of karma brings to the soul pain and suffering, which are often the results of its own past cruelty. Yet out of that pain is born strength, endurance, and compassion, with a longing to serve and heal. Mars is the instrument of the solar fire and energy brought into material manifestation. He is the great energizer of the zodiac. Through Aries, Mars ruled the head mind, the power of the intellect, which is, in the perfect man, must be fully developed and able to direct activity in all the skills of the physical life, be they practical, athletic, artistic, or scientific. Only through the development of the human mind can God individualize in man. In view of this close link with the Sun, which is exalted in Aries, it is not surprising that Mars is associated with the first ray, the outgoing solar ray of divine energy, creativeness, renewal, organization, and government. When powerful in a nativity, he gives all the positive attributes of courage, strength, creative power, vision, will, determination, joy, and freedom. These characteristics carried to excess become rash, impulsive action, foolhardiness, pride, willfulness, and rebellion. The vigorous Martian ray is easy to recognize in its purely physical manifestations, but becomes more complex and subtle as the solar energy is transmuted to the astral, mental, and higher mental planes. On the physical plane, Mars gives a tough, wiry, energetic body, which is alert, active, and always on the go. This physical energy needs to find expression in outdoor activities and sport, or in work which demands physical strength and stamina. Work with fire, iron, the metal of Mars, or with any kind of tools or instruments for cutting, hammering, molding, shaping matter to man's will. When Mars is in good aspect with Mercury, there will be much manual skill, which is useful in such occupations as draughtsmanship, engineering, carpentry, pottery, sculpture, even hairdressing. Surgeons often come under the Martian ray, as do butchers, soldiers, and all the work requires strength, courage, or daring. With the Martian courage and desire to know and experience on the various planes of consciousness, there is always a certain delight in taking risks, sometimes even a desire to flirt with death, in spite of the intense enjoyment of life which the Martian energy gives. On the mental planes, Mars often produces one who fights with the pen or with the tongue. Combined with Mercury, he sharpens the wit and makes the speech and writing terse, sarcastic, sometimes vitriolic, but always to the point. Few can make themselves so much feared as those with the Martian ray dominating their lower mental bodies, for they can mercilessly destroy their opponents with the weapons of satire or ridicule. When this power is used constructively, we find fighters for a cause. and nearly all the outstanding workers for social or political reform are in some way influenced by the Martian ray. Great politicians, journalists, and writers with the energy of Mars have this power to lead or dominate the thought of the masses. The soul fundamentally on the first ray always feels a deep yearning for self-mastery, or rather for the divine will to order every part of his being. He also instinctively resists the domination of another person, and will automatically assume a position of leadership or choose a task at which he can work independently. He or she is fully prepared to accept responsibility for their own actions and to reap what has been sown. It is easy to identify those who are strongly under this ray by their somewhat fiery and dominant manner, their enthusiasm, their capacity for organization, their desire to be in the forefront of any activity, and also their love of any adventurous project, especially if it involves risks. They can be led through affection, but never driven, for no amount of physical punishment will frighten them into following a path which they have determined to refuse. Mars often shows himself in the physical makeup by giving a reddish or ginger tinge to the hair and complexion, and a fiery sparkle to the eyes. Those who have Scorpio, the negative or water sign of Mars on the ascendant, or who have Mars rising in the negative sign, often hide their energy and determination beneath an apparently quiet and retiring personality. They do not rush in where angels fear to tread, but rather are watchful for their opportunity and achieve their ends through subtlety and intensity of purpose. Both types, however, have one outstanding quality in common: courage. Mars gives superb animal courage, which in positive types is expressed in daring, skill, and the ability to stand up to hardships, while the negative types have amazing powers of endurance, accepting without a murmur physical suffering which would defeat the less hardy. When Mars is weak in a nativity, there is a lack of physical energy and a tendency to give way before obstacles, for it is the Martian ray which gives fight, grit, endurance, the professional's refusal to be troubled by reverses, and the general ability to cope with adverse circumstances. Without this strength, the nature tends to be indolent, indecisive, and indifferent. On the other hand, an overabundance of Martian fire, which is not well channeled and controlled by a good Saturn and a strong Earth element, will lead the soul into all kinds of risky enterprises, for it gives the urge to respond to a challenge, no matter how foolish. Some people are often spoiling for a fight and need instead to be engaged in work which they find completely enthralling and which stretches them to the uttermost. Most people who achieve any degree of fame and success will have the Martian ray well developed, in addition to the ray of their own particular skill. Indeed, Mars might be termed the planet of skill and action. During certain stages of development, the soul has incarnations in which it appears to be thoroughly materialistic. It has to become fully immersed in matter in order to learn how to control it in a practical way. The soul must become adept in the art of self-preservation and in wresting a living from the earth. The skilled warrior has an important part to play in life. Likewise, the engineer, the colonizer, I disagree with that, and the pioneer. Unless we're talking about bees. I suppose bees would be all right in my book. A good and honest businessman contributes a service to his fellows through which he learns much about human nature and brotherhood. Jesus was trained as a carpenter, a Martian occupation involving sharp tools, and also was a great healer. We celebrate his symbolic birth at the winter solstice when the sun enters Capricorn, the sign in which Mars is exalted. Through the fixed water sign Scorpio, Mars rules the generative center and the driving force of sex. Together with the moon, Mars creates the astral desire body, through which the soul experiences pleasure and pain, attraction and repulsion. The Martian fire arouses deep and intense feelings through which the soul is made aware of the depths of sorrow and the heights of joy. Such intensity of personal feeling often leads to impulsive, ill-considered, and even violent action. On the other hand, when the powerful feelings are subordinated to the divine will, a selfless devotion to a cause or a person will result, and the desire nature will be under such control that no selfish feeling is allowed to shake the serenity or the chosen purpose of that individual. With the dynamic force of the emotional bodies harnessed, the soul becomes an immense power in the world. By self-discipline, it gains moral leadership. A fine example of this power directed for the good of humanity is to be seen in the life of Mahatma Gandhi. Obviously working on the first ray of government and law, the will ray, he ruthlessly applied this principle to himself and governed others through his own iron self-discipline and selfless love. In everyday life, we occasionally meet people with powerful feelings so well controlled that they quietly influence others through their poised strength and self-mastery. They seem to generate a magnetic strength and power. All emotional force has eventually to be channeled into service, probably first to a beloved personality and then to an ever-widening circle of souls in need. On the mental plane, the fire of Mars gives the intense desire to find truth, which characterizes the great scientists. Thus, Mars is also closely linked with the fifth ray of science, and his exaltation in Capricorn seems to show well the qualities of this ray. It gives courage to pioneer in the realms of thought, courage to test and experiment, courage to follow a gleam of vision until it becomes a reality. The ray of Mars shining through the earth element drives the soul on to ever greater achievement. We have only to read the biography of any outstanding scientist to realize the amount of care and attention they gave even to apparently unimportant detail. Everything in their lives became subordinated to the search for knowledge, in the quest of which they often endured hardships which seem almost intolerable, but which they hardly noticed. The joy resulting from some new discovery was a full compensation, almost as if the hardships and obstacles merely called forth a finer quality of devotion. As the feelings of those in love seem to be intensified by opposition, so the ardor of those dedicated to the search for truth grows stronger with every obstacle they have to surmount. Martyrdom of the physical body seems as nothing compared with victory in the search. Some kind of martyrdom in the cause is nearly always the lot of the devotee. In the Middle Ages, when conditions were crueler, martyrdom by fire or sword was commonplace. Today, the pressure more frequently takes the form of material hardship, but undoubtedly the cruelest obstacle remains the same in all ages: the ridicule and disbelief of those blinded by prejudice or vested interest. The energy of Mars, focused at a deeper level, awaken a desire for occult knowledge, which gives power on the inner planes, and an irresistible urge to penetrate the inner secrets of nature. This thirst for knowledge, for Aries rules the head, can lead the soul into light or darkness, according to whether it uses the occult secrets for selfish purposes or for the healing and upliftment of humanity. Symbolically, Mars could be likened to the pilgrim soul in every man, the prodigal son who leaves his father's house and journeys far into foreign lands. This story depicts the child of the sun descending into matter to seek experience, to search for truth. Saturn, polar opposite of the sun, represents Earth in its darkest, heaviest state, the outermost bounds of experience in physical matter. How significant, then, that Mars, the bearer of the solar fire, should be exalted in the earth sign of Capricorn, ruled by Saturn. This clearly symbolizes the purpose of the soul's continual incarnation in matter, to carry the divine solar fire into physical manifestation, to gain knowledge, experience, and power in every level of being, until at last it learns how to illumine and transform the very atoms of the earth. This will happen when, after much struggle and suffering, the light of the sun, the true self, is able fully to illumine the consciousness of the frontal mind, the everyday mind. In the early stages of the soul's progress, this divine fire and energy is misunderstood and abused. It is, as it were, recklessly spilled over, and life and love are cheap. But gradually, through alternating experiences of joy and suffering, the soul learns to restrain the Martian fire and to use it to create beauty, order, and harmony in its own being and in its environment. Destruction and construction play an equally important part in the progress of humanity. All is part of the great cycle of life in which the combined influences of Venus and Mars play an integral part. The gentle harmonizing power of Venus must so balance that of her partner Mars that the fierce fires of desire are transmuted into the warmth and radiance of selfless love, combined with a rock-like strength of purpose. Through Scorpio, which is associated with the genital organs, Mars rules physical conception, birth, and death. Gradually, however, the soul comes to realize that physical death is unimportant, just an incident in the soul's long journey through matter. The great death which has to be met and conquered is that second death, which is eternally symbolized by the cross of light encircled by light, and is associated with Aries, the fiery sign of Mars, which rules man's head and his limited personal consciousness. The second death we all have to face comes when the soul has seen the vision of Christ and longs only to become one with that glorious presence. At that moment, all personal desire dies in a willing surrender of the soul for the love of Creator, surrender of all that selfhood, that individuality which has been so hard-earned, enables the soul to die to the world and to awaken to cosmic consciousness. This is the meaning of the exaltation of the sun in Aries, sign of the Lamb of God. The light of eternal sun, the source of life, shines fully through the human consciousness of the Christed man. Easter, the festival of the resurrection of the Son of Man became divine, comes at the spring full moon, when the sun is in Aries and the moon is in Libra. I thought that very, very fitting to share with you all today, and I'm glad that I did. And I hope that you've enjoyed it. And I would remind you, of course, that I am not religious. I respect people whose hearts are sincere in their faith, but I am deeply spiritual, and that is why I have decided to share this with you today. For entertainment purposes only, I hope you're having a wonderful time, and thank you so much for stopping by. Bye for now.